Hi everyone, Cindy and I here again. We thought it would be a good idea just before most of the groups get up and running online with Zoom to do a brief discussion with you on some of the dynamics that you might be facing in small groups that are probably triggering some anxiety for you or will. And so we thought it would be good to just talk through them and hopefully set your minds at ease and give you some clear pointers on what it looks like or potentially will look like in terms of group dynamics online. So let's go for it. The first thing that we wanted to talk about, and I'm going to hand it over to Sins to start chatting this out a little bit, is just to remind us all to think about a Zoom group as a normal group. And that's maybe sounds a little obvious, hey Sins? Initially to say, well, of course it is, but maybe if you can briefly just reflect on why we've decided to start here.
Yeah, I think a trap that it's so easy to fall into is to think of this as some kind of another crisis thing that you have to now learn and negotiate. But really, God is still working in exactly the same way. We are still connecting and seeking for Him to connect us in the same way. The same boundaries apply. Yes, they might be applied in a bit of a different form. The same kind of stuff will come up for you around your group. And really, it's not like we're needing any kind of a special solution for this. Your group is still your group. Boundaries still need to apply. All the same things basically apply. Maybe in a bit of a different way, but it's still all the same.
And so really important to choose that intentionally. This is still a normal journey discipleship course, small group. And therefore then I need to still be the leader or the assistant, and people are still the participants, and we still trust in God.
And I think even in that then as well, your team meetings are still your team meetings where you need to go and you need to share and process what's going on for you, all of those same things still apply. The same confession, repentance stuff still applies. All of those things are still in place. It's just happening online.
And then I suppose in that, to briefly say that it's important to be confessing in your pre-brief debrief the anxieties that are triggered by being online. That's how to deal with them, to speak out your uncertainties, your fears, your feelings of disconnection, your belief that somehow you're not getting through to people. There's nothing you can do to control that. You need to confess.
No, absolutely. And just your fear of technical stuff, that somehow it's going to hamper your ability to connect. Confess that as well.
Right. So next slide. So as a step from that, we thought it would be good to just give you a suggested structure on how to run your group. But more for us, it was important to say, as you go into your small groups online, even more so, be very clear in your own minds as to what your structure is going to look like for your small group, and make sure that you and your assistant have both clearly talked it out and know what you're about through the structure. So we're going to just take this point by point, and so Sins will take point one and then we'll alternate through it.
So ensure that all videos are on. Yes, pretty self-explanatory, but it's easy just to get carried away by wanting to connect. Make sure that everyone, you can see they're animated, they're blinking or whatever, so that everyone comes on, everyone feels connected right from the start.
And then it makes sense, just don't forget, you would normally open your physical small group with prayer, open this one with prayer. And if it helps, I think certainly for me it would, is to just make sure that what I do pray about in that opening prayer is that God would remind us all that we are connected, whether we feel it or not. So not to pray, God, help us feel connected, because that may be a distraction. People may not, certainly for a while, feel connected, if ever. But that we would choose to be connected, we would choose to be present, and that we would choose to trust God that you are actually still working with us, and even through one another, you're working with us. So to pray for those things. And then obviously the normal things, that God would keep it safe, that God would protect us in terms of crosstalk and confidentiality, and that we'd all risk being transparent.
Yeah, yeah. Reading through the interaction checklist, the small group interaction checklist, and really, if you read through it in a very dismissive, this is so rote, whatever, that's what you're communicating to your participants. So really be aware of what comes up for you when you read through it, and just read through it like it really matters, because it does, because these are the boundaries. This is what keeps people safe and forms part of the rhythm of your online group. Yeah.
And then after that, so hopefully you're taking quicker than we're taking here, you will remind your participants of the boundaries, the normal ones, crosstalk and confidentiality, but make sure that you, both of you, assistant and leader, are clear on all the forms of crosstalk and ways that confidentiality could be broken. And remember, you've just read through the checklist, so you've got some indications already there of what sorts of crosstalk and confidentiality may be engaged with in this format on Zoom. So remind people of that. Remind people that crosstalk includes some of those things, if not all of those things that you've gone through on the checklist. So if people are fidgeting, if they're switching their video on and off, if they are getting up and moving around their room, or looking in other places, or tapping something, those would be forms of crosstalk. And those things you want to be able to address in boundary as you would normally in a normal physical group. I think we gave some examples of how to do that, but I don't have the notes up. Cindy does.
It's a bit late. I think it's in our next slide.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah. Asking people to mute their sound when not talking. I think that just, again, it cuts out distraction. It cuts out the possibility of me being self-conscious because there's noise in my background, or other people getting distracted by noise in my background. So either way, I think it's a win-win, just to keep sound muted when not talking.
Right. It goes without saying to remind people to switch their sound on when they are talking. Otherwise, they won't be heard. Then number 6, we're suggesting that from there you do a 1-sentence check-in. Remember that people on Zoom will have been watching the teaching on their own, and almost certainly have gone through the worship time on their own, and their first connection will be when they enter the large group meeting and do large group ministry together. But still there's no speaking at that point. The first time that they're actually talking with anyone is in this moment when you open it up for them to share. And so that can be quite intimidating, apart from the fact that it's in an environment that for many people is foreign. So just giving them a very clear, pointed way to share what's going on for them without sharing too much is a really good way to connect. As an example, we've said, for instance, give 3 feeling words describing your response to the teaching. Or maybe in 1 sentence, share what God, share one thing God spoke to you about through the teaching. Obviously there's much room for what you want to share, but you want to keep them with something very pointed to give and very contained.
Yeah.
You probably want to keep you probably want to keep that to about, depending on the size of your group, no longer than about 5 minutes to go through the whole group as a check-in.
Yeah, because you're not actually processing there. You're just really doing a connect.
Correct.
Yeah, and then after that would then come the time for actually processing. So you'll say like, oh, okay, guys, we've got however much time left. So we're going to, each person will get around 10 minutes or whatever the case might be. And then obviously your assistant picks up on that. It's a bit difficult for them to keep time boundaries. So you really need to take responsibility for that, because they can't like tap their watch without everyone seeing it. Yeah.
Right. And then final point, again, common sense thing that it's easy to forget is that the leader or the assistant, if that person is leading, is must remember to invite each person by name to share. We assume so many things when we're physically together. So most often we will look at someone and speak to them without using their name in a small group, and they will naturally understand that it's their time to speak. We don't have that ability online. You may think you're looking at someone, But remember, keep in mind what they're seeing on their screen. They're just seeing your face. They have no idea in which direction you're looking. You're only looking forward. So it's vital to always address people by their names, whether you're in a pre-brief, debrief, or in a small group. Get into the habit of doing that all the time. It just makes the flow easier. Also, it's not a good idea to leave it open to just waiting for people to share. Say, I'm just going to leave space and let people share. In this context, that can really heighten anxiety, and we'll talk about that later. It would be important for you as the leader of that group to decide the order of people sharing and then speak those people's names out as it's their time. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so we're looking at more kind of your non-verbals and that kind of thing as they apply to Zoom. First person is eye contact, which ties directly into what Craig was just saying. It's easy to kind of let your eyes wander to that particular person who's on this far side of your screen who you might be talking to, but they're not going to see you looking at them. They're going to see your eyes off screen. And so try as far as possible to keep engaging with the camera, because in that they will feel like you are making eye contact with them. Like if I look right now, I'm looking at Craig, but it creates like kind of a disjuncture in our communication. So make eye contact with your camera rather than looking at the person.
It's harder to be aware of this when you're not talking. I notice it's easier to look at the person who's speaking, and then your face and your eyes kind of move away. I wouldn't get hung up on this for participants initially, but make sure that you're doing that. And then we've already spoken about using people's names, so I'm not going to unpack that anymore. Just remember, use people's names.
Yeah. Then the crosstalk, we gave a few examples. Someone rocking, tapping a pen, playing with the pen, fidgeting, all of those kinds of things. Even someone getting up in the middle of, while someone's sharing, someone just randomly getting up and going to the toilet and then coming back again. Again, they are making a communication about that person's story. So all of those kinds of things you need to put in boundaries, and putting in a boundary could look like something like, sure, Craig, I can see you're quite restless tonight. Would it be possible for you to take a moment to find a comfortable position so that you can sit more still or more calmly and engage more fully with the group? Something like that. Just really kind of just gently putting in the boundaries, helping them to be aware, because they're probably not aware they're doing it, so helping them to be aware of it and just contain. And now's not the time for them to process what's going on or to ask them what's going on for you. You can maybe do that if they've got a turn to share later.
We also touched briefly on how much stronger the desire is to give body cues, like movements, as a way of communication online, because you want people to know that you're engaging. There's a heightened sense of that. Do you want to speak briefly about that?
Yeah, I think it's very easy to almost want to exaggerate it so that they know I'm listening, and that because I might not be feeling that connected. And so even for the participants, there might be an increased inclination to engage in the nodding and the all of that kind of thing. So again, draw people's attention to that. Be aware of that for yourself. That is the tendency, and it's okay. Be aware of it, but again, just put in the boundaries. Remember, crosstalk includes nodding our heads, so could we just refrain from doing that when someone else is talking?
Right.
Yeah.
Then we've also put a point down to pay attention to video and lighting. Make sure that you do this for yourselves as team members, and make sure that it's right for you first before you start to talk to others. We want to keep this as simple as possible, so we're not looking for perfect productions, and we don't want to heighten people's anxiety around this, but to just keep it as simple. So what we're suggesting is that you encourage your participants to make sure that their video is showing them from the chest up, and that they have a light in front of them rather than behind them, so that their face is in the light and not in shadow. I think a useful thing would be to take your first group, sometime in your first group, to help each person in the group make sure that they set this up right where it's needed. It shouldn't take too long, and they don't need big spotlights. They just need to be able to find a position in the room that they'll be using every evening, where when they sit there, they know that the lighting works the best, and the picture.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then silences. It can be particularly disconcerting when you online, because there might be a fear of like, sure, okay, are we connecting? Is it hanging? Is there a delay? And so be aware of what comes up for you. Process it as you normally would, bring it in confession, all of that kind of normal stuff, because remember, this is a same normal small group. So allow there to be silences. Don't try to fill the silences or to keep checking if there's like half a split second. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Just give it space. Allow yourself to be peaceful about it. Give it a moment. They might be thinking, they might be processing stuff. Just kind of pace yourself, and don't, if you become anxious about it, engage with it. Speak about it with your assistant or with your leader. But there will be silences. Give that space. Yeah.
Great.
Anything else around that, Craig?
No, I think we'll unpack more just in terms of silence in a moment.
Right.
Oh, there we go. This is part of that. I'm sorry, I've got the sun shining through a window to my one side, so I keep battling with the light. Right, so what we wanted to do, without making this too complicated, is just refer briefly to a dynamic that is pretty common to all of us when we're engaging online. When we're connecting relationally, physically, particularly in small groups, I think most of us are unaware that we're gaining that sense of connection, not just in our minds and through expressions and emotionally, but also with our bodies. It's a natural thing. We feel connected because we're also physically in the same space, and we're able to even subconsciously read what's going on for other people with our bodies, as well as with our minds and our emotions. And so we feel connected through all of those dynamics. Now, when we're online, our bodies are missing from that dynamic. I'm physically in one space, but I'm connecting with someone who's not actually there. So my mind is telling me that they're there. I may even potentially, not always, that's always oftentimes a struggle, but sometimes I might even be connecting with them emotionally, picking up their emotion. But physically, I'm not. And because of that, there's this discord, there's this disconnection, this dissonance between what I'm physically experiencing and what I'm mentally, emotionally experiencing. And that can increase, and almost certainly for most of us, increases that anxiety. Sins, do you want to take it from there?
Yeah. And I think that like quite a few people have said it's really tiring to be connecting in this way. And yes, it is, because I'm living in that place of they're present, but they're absent. We connected, but we're not. And so just, I think the biggest thing is this is going to be there. We are just giving it to you to say, be aware of it. This is normal. I think the thing is, when I'm not aware of it, then it can take me by surprise. But when I'm aware of it, I can engage with it. If I'm unaware of it, I might try to control the group.
Correct.
I might try to kind of force and like heighten my attempts to connect, because now I'm feeling anxious, and if I can only get a response from them, then I'll feel safer. And so again, then it becomes about me trying to control the group, trying to bring down my own anxiety. And so it's be aware of it, just engage with it, bring it in confession. And then I think part of that whole thing then is also how normally I'm aware of what's happening on the inside of me, but I don't know what my outside looks like. And suddenly when I'm on Zoom, I'm aware of what's happening on the inside, but then I see my outside reflected. And so again, it's part of that whole confusion and that discord that happens, because I'm on my inside, but now I'm seeing my outside. And again, this can increase anxiety. It can make you feel self-conscious, but be aware of it and begin to engage in it for yourself. Yeah.
We really want to emphasize that. We really want to, sorry, Sins, we really want to emphasize that, because what we're saying is this is a big trigger to anxiety. Already it's an unknown environment for many of us. Already we feel so out of our comfort zones. And now we have this added, potentially subconscious trigger as well. that's going on. And so it can make it feel like this is such a big, difficult thing to do, but it's not. And the process through this struggle is the same as through anything else. And as Sin said, we really want you to encourage you to just learn to use your pre-briefs as places to speak it out, to pray it out, and to keep choosing the truth with God. Okay.
Yeah. We just want to grow the areas that you need to connect with God around. That's why this is important.
Yes.
Cool.
So final comments. Yes.
Right. Do you want to stop?
When to ask the host for help. So we haven't really talked this out too much because we have been running out of time to make this prepped. But I think you need to first make sure that you've looked through Megan's documentation around the steps to take if there's certain issues. I think the main issues will be around sound and video connection. A thing to keep remembering is part of working online is that there's always going to be little hiccups with sound and video. That's normal to the environment. And if you're going to react to every little hiccup or video, you're going to really create a lot of stress for yourselves. Cindy gave great pointers earlier on in our conversation now to just say, when that happens, just wait a moment. Most often it resolves itself and it carries on. If there's a persistent issue with someone's connection, then I think we've given a list in terms of escalating the process. So first, try switching video off. I think what we've suggested in our guidelines is if one person needs to switch their video off, then you need to switch everyone's video off for that connection, so that we're all in the same environment, and therefore then that increases that sense of safety. If the problem persists, then connect with the host. We're not going to unpack the process here, but simply either phone or send them a WhatsApp. And possibly what they will do is disconnect that person entirely, get that person to maybe switch their Wi-Fi off, reboot the computer, reconnect, and then bring them back into the meeting. Remember that that's for that small group. Don't go into that space in your mind where you think, oh my word, it's always going to be like this. Remember how many times you've had issues when you've been connecting with family, friends, and work. It's never persistently like that. It comes and goes. We're trusting that God will bring stability in that. Making small issues.
And I mean, I think, that's what the host is there for, right? Craig has just spoken. Some of these issues are small, some of them are temporary. Let them be. Don't try to make everything controlled and yes, we need a rule about this and we need a rule about this and we need a rule about this, because there are so many rules to remember. We're just going to get kind of overwhelmed and more anxious. So the little things, the temporary things, yes, there will be issues. There are issues when we are face to face, but don't be reactive. Again, process your own anxiety. If it's a preference, so I don't know, I prefer seeing people in long ways rather than crossways. Well, that's your preference. It's not a rule that we need to apply to all groups. So let those small things be small. Does it interfere in my ability to connect with the person? If so, I need to address it. If it doesn't, well, there's no need to address it. Just leave it be. Yeah. Just breathe.
Right. Yeah. So I think that we've kind of emphasized that make small issues point, rather than making them bigger than they need to be. So finally, and Sins may have other things to put into this last point of don't make excuses for yourself. Certainly for me, don't be tempted to go into trying to apologize all the time when things don't work. Okay, it's not in your control. And if you're trying to apologize, it's because you're allowing that context to make you feel bad about you, and you feel responsible in yourself to somehow make it better. You can't. So don't revert back to potential old good boy, good girl behavior. Really be aware of that and just be present. Most people in your small group will pick up on your lead emotionally. And so if you are okay and unflustered and you're able to just walk it through, they will come in line with that themselves because they will feel safe. I think one last thing to say in that is one small group that doesn't work out properly because of connections or whatever else, it does not mean all small groups work out badly. It's only one small group. And it's very possible then to just pick it up and carry on the next time around. Since you want to add to that?
Yeah. And I think also that thing, it's like, oh my word, guys, I'm so sorry, my hair's such a mess tonight. Or like, don't draw attention to yourself. Like, oh, listen to my voice. Or like, that's not the space for here. Stuff that normally stays outside the group should still stay outside the group. It's exactly the same kind of thing. So don't kind of make it all about you. And I say that with like really not anything, no malice in my heart, but those are things, the stuff that's triggering for you, just as would normally apply, you process that outside the small group. Don't bring it up in the small group with your people. Yeah.
So maybe to close, like one of the thoughts that I had just recently with one of the teams that I was doing, helping them with their orientation evening, was this, just as a comment to them, and I think it's appropriate to all of us, is that God uses insecure places and places of vulnerability and risk to grow us. Just because we're online, that doesn't change it. This is a very dynamic place for God to grow us as team, individually and as team. And I think the Holy Spirit is putting his finger on aspects of our identities that are only being highlighted in their insecurity because we're actually working in this environment now. And if we see that and we're willing to, as much as it's anxious and it's scary, risk with him and say, yes, God, we're going to go there, how much is he going to grow us? And so to just share with you all how much excitement I have and anticipation I have for us as team, I think that God is going to transform the way we look in the next 6-8 months. And we're going to look vastly different in terms of the way that we do our work at the end of that 6 or 8 months, as opposed to now. So come on, God, do your work. Thank you, Lord. Okay.
Absolutely.
Goodbye, everyone.
Cool.